Code, or also known as Kode, is at least one character name that has recently become quite an exciting topic to discuss, especially since he is a character who remains fairly mysterious so far and has been missing for quite a long time. If we count based on chapters, at least around 15 chapters have passed without any information, clues, or hints whatsoever about his whereabouts. And regardless of assumptions, theories, or analyses, not just from me, but from many fandoms across the internet, this character has been actively discussed. Yep, you know what I mean, right? And a few days ago, of course, we also discussed one topic that I'm sure would never get boring. Starting from where he has been hiding all this time, what his grand plan is, and what he will do next. At the very least, in that video, we thoroughly discussed a major probability regarding Code's next move, especially behind Ryu's death as a Shinju. However, this time we won't be talking about the same thing, but rather a different case. I mean, there is a theory, or perhaps this could be considered a form of proof about Kawaki's fate, or even Code's, that actually occurs in the future. Because as we know, in the world of Boruto, the biggest answers often don't come from dialogue, but from details we barely notice, right? Especially when it comes to whether power is an absolute factor, and whether it truly determines a real victory. In other words, who will win, and who will die first. Because if we take a step back and look at how Kishimoto and Ikemoto build their story, there is a pattern they have consistently repeated since the Naruto era. Visual details are almost never created without a reason. From eye symbols, scars, to clothing color choices, everything often serves as a hint toward the direction of the story, even long before the narrative actually reaches that point. And yes, for today's topic, as I mentioned earlier, it's Code and Kawaki. And once again, it seems unnecessary for me to explain in detail who Code is and so on, because it would probably be boring due to repetitive and overly formal introductions. But at least, one thing is certain, and you should know, that the destinies of Code and Kawaki are intertwined. Or perhaps the right phrase to describe this is that they are the determinants of the true final destiny. Because both Kawaki and Code have shouldered destinies that I believe will truly determine the end of the shinobi as well. However, you need to remember that in general, when talking about Final Destiny, we cannot only judge or determine it based on Kawaki and Code alone. Rather, there are many characters who also have destinies that will determine the final outcome, starting from Boruto, Kashin Koji, or even Momoshiki himself. Yep, I think you understand what I mean. But at least, a major point that truly becomes the deciding factor is the dialogue between Boruto and Kashin Koji in chapter 13. In short, after Kashin Koji revealed that he survived the battle against Ishiki, he awakened Jippo and saw a high probability in the future that Boruto would fight Kawaki and end up dying alongside Sarada, who was trying to protect Boruto. Then, something far more terrifying would happen. Kawaki would lose to Code, who has overwhelming abilities and strength, and Kawaki would end up becoming food for the Ten Tails. And yep, at least at this point, we can assume that it won't happen in the future. The reason for saying that is because Boruto and Sarada didn't die. Because, once again, the major trigger that ended with Kawaki losing to Code and becoming food for the Ten Tails was the death of Sarada and Boruto. Yeah, I think at this point you guys understand what I mean. However, what remains a mystery, or perhaps we can say a context, is what if the fate of Boruto and Sarada's deaths is successfully avoided, but Code's fate to have overwhelming power and abilities cannot be avoided? And again, you know what I mean, right? Then will Kawaki still end up losing to Code and becoming Fu the Ten Tails? And honestly, up to this point, there are many interconnected timelines. And regardless of any theories or analyses about Code's future, especially how he will become strong and become the new Otsutsuki, there is proof that Code's fate is exactly as Matsuri said. In other words, Code doesn't seem like he will truly become strong, but will instead end up as a clown or even meet a tragic death. And all of that if the timeline of Boruto and Kawaki's battle at the beginning of the Boruto Next Generation chapter actually happens. Yep, and let me say it again. Code may end up with something worse and even far beyond what we imagine. He will not really become the new Otsutsuki or even end up as the final villain with overwhelming abilities and power. Instead, he will really end up as a clown who may die tragically. But, of course, if the timeline of Kawaki and Boruto's battle at the beginning of the Next Generation chapter is going to happen. As evidence to support this theory, we can see this in a design that becomes a big plot twist for this case. Because if we really pay attention to this visual detail, I think it's not a coincidence, but there is a reason for it. But in short, do you think Kawaki still has some modes that will be awakened? I mean, do you feel that there is a high possibility that Kawaki will get a new visual visual design along with increased power? Because of course, I think you all understand that every Kara character, especially Kawaki, always gets a new design change along with increased power, right? But regardless of your answers and how this will ultimately play out, take a closer look, especially Kawaki's outfit design in the battle between Kawaki and Boruto. Do you feel that something is different? Especially Kawaki. Because once again, if we compare Kawaki in this timeline and Kawaki now, he definitely looks completely different, right? This is where I suspect something far beyond what we've ever imagined. For example, let's look at Code in the colored version, especially on the cover of Boruto Part 1 Chapter 71. There, Code is clearly wearing a dark purple outfit with a very familiar pattern. The color is not bright purple, but dark purple with a distinctive fabric texture. And this is important because the color and texture are not random design choices. Meanwhile, Kawaki in the early timeline of the next generation also has a purple scarf. And if you look more closely, the color is almost identical to Code's. It's not just the color, but the texture also feels the same. Thick, rough, and like protective fabric, not just an ordinary accessory. In the world of Naruto and Boruto, visual similarities like this almost always have symbolic meaning. But that's not the real point. What if all these similarities are not a coincidence? What if Kawaki defeats Code and then takes something that belongs to him? I know, it might sound crazy and unreasonable, but can we at least consider it? Because after all, Code remains a threat, especially with his desire to take revenge on Kawaki. In other words, these similarities may not just be symbols of victory, but proof that Kawaki is the one who will ultimately erase Code from this world. But what do you guys think? Does it make sense? And once again, this feels like a symbol with a much deeper meaning. Regardless of whether Kawaki actually takes something from Code or wears something that once belonged to him, these similarities alone have a strong enough probability to convince many fans that this isn't just about defeating Code physically, but about erasing his very existence. Especially since Kawaki will always stay at the top tier of power thanks to Amato's plot twist-driven adjustments, right? So if this theory is true, then Code won't just lose. He will be completely erased, and his role as the major threat will be taken over by Kawaki himself. Oh yeah, shout out to Reptar, and if you want to read the details, you can pause this video. And as a final conclusion, do you all think this makes sense? And will Code's fate truly unfold as Matsuri once said? But if I may offer one conclusion, I'm fairly certain that Code's fate will end in Kawaki's hands. And of course, in the end, this is all just analysis and theory. So yeah, thank you for watching, likes and subs. I'm Nim without the E. See you in the next video.